Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to another episode of Muslim Minds. Today we have an amazing guest who has really been through it in his life. He has a lot of experiences that he's here to share, inshallah. And so without further ado, Mr. Ismail Royer is here with us today, inshallah.
Jazakallahu khairan. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So let's get started. Who
Yes.
is Ismail Royer?
Oh, wow. I don't, where to start. I mean, I think maybe the best place to start is how I came to Islam. So I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. And first in the city, and then we lived in the country for a while out on a farm. And then when I was probably about 7, we moved to the suburbs, and I, was basically raised in the suburbs of St. Louis. And I was raised a Catholic, baptized Catholic, and went to Catholic schools and private schools for my most of my youth. Sometime around, I'd say about ninth grade or 8th grade, maybe, I started having some questions about about Christianity. I wasn't exactly sure if I really, the main thing was I wasn't sure if I believed the Trinity. I mean, I did enjoy going to church. I was never one of those people who hated going to church. I loved actually going to church, and I was I was a believer, and I really felt like God was listening to me. And I wasn't one of those people who disliked religion. I really enjoyed church, but the main issue I was having was the Trinity. Like, how can there be like three and one? And it didn't make sense to me, really. So I would ask, like, I remember asking like one of the nuns at the school that I went to, and this was in 7th grade, and she was like, well, it's just something we have to believe in. And and like, now that I'm older, I understand that there are some things that, like, as a Muslim, even, that they're hard to wrap your head around, just because we're human beings, and it's hard for human beings to grasp things that are like in the ghaib, in the unseen. But when it comes to something like the Trinity, that's like it actually does not, to me, it just did not make sense. It's one thing to like say like, well, I don't, we don't know that, that's a mystery or something like that, but for something just to not make sense, like 1 + 1 + 1 equals
3.
it's 3,
But
you know what I mean?
equals 1.
But with 1, yeah, it just didn't make sense to me. And I say that not to like offend any Christians who might be listening, but it's just like, it just didn't make sense to me. So there was that. Now, sometime around 8th grade, I started also like really, this is something that young people can relate to, but I started like really having issues with like the society in my school. Like, I went to really very elite private school at that point. But our family was very poor, and the kids, like, you start noticing that other people are wearing like real high fashion stuff, real expensive stuff, and yet I'm wearing like shoes with holes in them, and they're inviting me to their houses. Like, I was like, some of my classmates were some of like the wealthiest families in St. Louis. They would invite me over to their mansions, and and I would go over there, and as a kid you don't really think about it, but then when you start getting older, it's like, I can't invite them over to my like crummy apartment, where I live, in kind of a, I still lived in the suburbs, alhamdulillah. I mean, we weren't poor. I mean, but relatively speaking, it was like,
So kids with mansions
kids with mansions, and they would make fun of me, and they started, that was the other thing, they started making fun of me. And one thing that like really struck me was like, my mom worked at McDonald's, to try to make ends meet, and for a while, and so she saved and saved and saved to buy me a polo sweater, and so I had this polo sweater that I wore to school, and it was like, I was so proud of it because everyone had polo stuff, you know what I mean? And I realized that, like, even that was not enough. People still were making fun of me, and they were like, they had a different polo sweater for every day of the week. I mean, I had my one, you know what I mean? So like, after all that effort from my mom, I still like, so, it's like, you can't, it's like, it's a hill you can't climb, and so I just, I kind of started feeling, and it's not a good, I want to say this is not a mature way to react, but I started feeling kind of like resentful, you know what I mean? Like, and so I started hearing about like punk rock music. So this is like maybe 86, and 85, 86. And I started getting into like punk rock music. And one of the bands was this. I don't know if I should mention that. I mean, it's Sex Pistols. Okay, so they had a song that started. It goes, "I am the Antichrist." That was like the first song on the album, and I went and got it, and I was like, whoa, I didn't like it at first because I was like, I'm Christian, you know what I mean? I was like, but the thing is, here's the trick, it's like the more you listen to it, the more it, it becomes normal to you. And then from there, I started getting like other kind of more like ideological, like explicitly very anti-religious music. Now, not all punk is anti-religious, and I'll explain that. It kind of, some punk bands like helped me kind of find my way back to religion, you know what I mean? But at the time, I started feeling like, first of all, I'm in like Mr. Rebellion. I was 12, 13, you know what I mean? Like I'm
that age,
at that age, you know what I mean? When it's like, everything is, I'm rebelling against my, my classmates, and the whole social structure. I'm rebelling against my parents for no reason at all. They were lovely parents, you know what I mean? Like
all you could see was the one polo sweatshirt. Yeah.
Well, I wasn't mad at them for that. I was just actually just generally, I'm just like in rebel mode. You know what I mean? I was really a dumb kid, to be honest. But that's how we. I don't know.
I think
most
that
kids.
is how. Yeah, a lot of kids are that way, where it's
most
like
kids are like,
nothing will please them. They just want more and more and more. But that's just.
And they want to also like everything, because they're testing boundaries, and they're like, you can't tell me what to do. And it's like all I said was like, clean up your room. You know what I mean? It's like, no, I'm rebelling. And that sort of thing. So I end up actually becoming an atheist, and a lot of the music I was listening to was actually really smart, in the sense that, a lot of it was like, oh, here's what the United States is doing in Central America, the kind of music I was listening to. Almost like you could say, like, I don't know if you know Rage Against the Machine is, but it came along. Yeah, they came along many years after I was doing this. But anyway, like really politically oriented music that was like really oddly specific. Like when you get their record and it's almost like a Howard Zinn like textbook on like, what's wrong with America, so I'm against, now I'm against American policy in Iran, and American policy in in Central America. And I started developing all these like real specific kind of like ideological positions on issues that were like real big at the time. Like now they would just be in history books, but at the time they were like going on, so in the same way that we might be like protesting against Gaza, what's going on in Gaza or something like that, I was like at the time like protesting against like US actions in Central America. And so, I just got real involved in that type of stuff, and I got linked up with different groups. So long and short of it is, I became an atheist, and I was like a real ideological atheist and like activist and stuff for a number of years. And then I started like also like playing in a punk band. I was like singing in a punk band, and I started getting involved in drugs, unfortunately. Nothing like, not like coke or heroin or meth or anything, but like weed. Smoking a lot of weed, LSD. Those were my two main things that I was doing. I don't really drink because it made me sick, but I just had this like period in my life where I was doing a lot of this stuff. I end up like, I did so bad in high school. I was like in high school, my ninth grade, I got all Fs. Every single class was an F. Every class was an F because I was so high all the time, And I was also, the other thing is, I don't know if you watch this movie, like, not that I'm here recommending movies, but like 21 Jump Street with, it was like,
just a whole kind of,
mentality of like, you're there and you're like, your tribe. Like, so I had my like 2-3 punk kids, and we're like at war with the jocks and the football players. And there was all these different tribal groups, that like, I'm constantly like, I wasn't like, for me, school was just like a gladiator zone where I'd go in there, and I was getting bullied a lot because I had like, a mohawk, and I had like, but the thing is, like, here's the interesting thing, and this actually ends up influencing me a lot later in life, is that I was like, okay, am I a kid who gets bullied? No, I'm not. You know what I mean? I was never like a tough kid, but I was just like, I'm not the guy who's getting bullied, So I would walk around like, like picking fights and acting crazy, hoping that they wouldn't fight me back, but like just wanting people to think I was crazy, so I managed to get through high school without getting beat up, through those kind of shenanigans. But that ends up like playing a big role in my life later, that kind of like attitude, so anyway, now here's the interesting thing, right? By the time I was like a junior and a senior, I had calmed down like a
Mhm.
lot, and I was like, you know, getting A's and B's, and I was like, trying to like, I was going to summer school to try to make up, try to recover, but I was still like an
Redemption
atheist.
arc. Was there
Yeah, it was starting,
with yeah.
and so that's the interesting thing is like it's I didn't like turn myself around 180 degrees, but I started like being like, okay, that's not really the life I want to
Yeah.
live, and you know what I mean. And you asked me something. You said, "Who is Ismail Roy?" Which is really interesting because my assistant principal, the vice principal, Mr. Priest, I still remember his name. Priest. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's very ironic.
it is ironic. He called me into his office. Now I had in my pocket like 5 hits of LSD wrapped up in aluminum foil at the time, and he sits me down just like we're sitting like this, and he says, he went by Randy at the time. So he says, "Who?" He says, "I want to ask you a question." He says, "Who is Randy Royer?" And I said, "Oh wow, that's I was like, I said, I don't know how to answer that." And he says, "Well," he says, "because if if I ask a religious person that, they'll say I'm a child of God. If I ask someone who is like a devoted son, they'll say I'm a son. So who are you? And I was like, I feel like first of all, I felt like he was disappointed because I couldn't really answer anything like that. But he let me go, and he said, I heard that you're selling drugs, and I actually had asked someone if they wanted to buy a hit or something like
Yeah.
that. I wasn't like a drug dealer, but it was like I had it.
Had it.
Yeah.
Make some
So
extra money.
exactly. So someone immediately went and told on me, but he didn't shake me down. He didn't have a cop, search me. He just asked me, "Who are you?" And this is one of these incidents in my life that so I know Socrates said like the unexamined life is not worth living. And another thing he said is, man, know thyself. So you really have to like begin to like examine yourself. And this is part of what we call as Muslims like tazkiyah, like examine yourself. Fa'ina tathabun. So where are you going?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? That's really what struck me at the time. You know what I mean? Now, after that, and I had a class, science class, and my the assistant teacher, she was a student, she was a senior, and I was a senior, I was a junior, I think, and she had she was Palestinian, and she didn't wear hijab at the time, although later I met her a few years later, and she was wearing hijab, mashallah, but she didn't wear hijab at the time, and she was really mean to me, like really mean, and and I don't know why she was so mean to me all the time, and then she saw my notebook, and I had written like freedom or something like that on it. She goes, huh? And she goes, do you know anything about Palestine? I said, no, I don't know anything about it. I didn't know. She said, here, read this paper that I wrote for my, American government class or whatever, history class or whatever. So I was like, okay. So I read it. And I was like, wow, that's like, I didn't realize that, this is what's going on. And I was like, I really hope that your people get, freedom or whatever. And she was like, that like night and day, like she was like, so she was nice to me, and I kind of, so little things like that, I start meeting like Muslims here and there, realizing that there are actually Muslims around me. And I was also really interested in like Public Enemy, this rap group at the time that was talking about like Malcolm X, and I started reading Malcolm X's book. And so little things like start calling me to Islam here and there, Well, I ended up moving out of my house. I, graduated from high school, alhamdulillah, in 91, and started going to college, and I got an apartment. And I was in Denny's, which is like a diner, like in the line, like 3 a.m. in the morning with my friend. And we were debating like the civil rights movement, and we're like, we were like real into, like I said, like, civil rights and stuff,
Yeah.
And I'm a white dude and he's a white dude. And so like we're debating like the Black Panthers, and I'm like, well, Huey P. Newton's view on the revolution was this. And he's like, no, Bobby Seale said this. And we're going back and forth, right? And we're like, okay, in the suburbs of St. Louis, 2 white guys, So there was a guy in the line in front of us that we didn't really notice at the time. Like I noticed him, but so the waitress seats us next to him, and so we're just going at it about like debating about like the different visions of the Black Panther Party. And I mean, so this guy says, he's black and he's wearing a kufi, right? And he says, hey, he goes, you guys come here. So we go and sit down next to him, and he goes, who are you? Like, look at this, who are you? You know what I mean? It's really interesting, So I'm like, I don't know, how do we answer that? Like, well, we're a punk band. We had a punk band. That's how we answered. That was like my identity.
Hmm.
And anyway, he was Muslim, and it turns out that it was Ramadan, and he starts talking to us about Islam. And I ended up becoming really good friends with him. His name was Farad Donaldson, and he's actually we're still friends to this day.
Oh, mashallah.
Yeah, and he was African American convert to Islam. So we end up getting an apartment together, like a couple months down the
Yeah.
road after hanging out, and like he's like needs a place to stay. And we're like, oh hey, why don't you move in? Anyway, long and short of it is, he had a Quran, and I used to read it, and we used to debate religion because remember, I'm like an atheist
Yeah.
at the time. I'm like, no, you can't prove that there's God, God exists and all this. And in the end, he would always win the debates. You know what I mean? Like he would always win the debates. And so one day, we're in the park, and there's a beautiful bird in the tree and the singing. It was a beautiful day, and he says, he asked me, he said, do you see that bird and the peace that it has? And I said, yeah, it's beautiful, And he says, if you become Muslim, you'll have the peace that this bird has, because this bird does only what God wants it to do, and we human beings, we have the right and the ability to choose whether or not we're going to follow God's will. But that bird has, that's what he does. He's a slave of God. But you have the ability to choose to do that. And I was like, wow, that really blew my mind. You know what I mean? It really blew my mind. And I was like, I knew it was true. It was like, it wasn't even like a logical argument. It was just like, I knew it. So without telling him, I looked up in the phone book, like, mosque, Islamic center, whatever. And I found that I was living not far from the masjid. And I went in downtown St. Louis. And I went in there, and the first person I met when I went into the door was another white guy, like my age, and I said, tell me about Islam. And we started talking, and I am still friends with him to this
Oh,
day.
mashallah.
Yeah, Omar Lee is his name. So anyway, that's
Shout
how
out to you guys if you guys are watching this.
yeah, that's how I converted. And they actually, what happened is, I didn't know much about Islam at the time, just what I had like kind of learned from debating
Hmm.
the brother a little bit. But I went in there, and like I sat down with like a circle of, there was a whole bunch of like Pakistani kind of elders, like older guys. Kind of, I found out later they were like cab drivers and also tablighi,
Hmm.
So they're knowledgeable about the deen, what I'm saying? They know how to do da'wah, so they're asking me like, do you believe that God sent prophets? I was like, yeah, I did believe that. And, do you believe this? Do you believe that? They're going, basically, I didn't know at the time, but they're going through the 6 pillars of Iman,
Yeah.
And so they said, then you're a Muslim, And well, they asked me about the Prophet Muhammad. They said, do you believe that he was a prophet? And I said, well, I said, if he taught this, and I also was like really struck by like their manners, their good manners, and the intelligence of my friend. See, that was the thing about Christianity, is like, I had this, which turns out not to be entirely accurate, you know what I mean? But I had an impression
Hmm.
at the time that, like, you'd have to be kind of dumb to, to like just believe what people tell you and stuff. But like with the Muslims I was dealing with, I was like, these are really intelligent people, and they're like actually like, reading a lot. There's books everywhere in the masjid. I'm
Yeah.
like, this is like a, an intellectual type religion,
Yeah.
And so I said, well, if the Prophet Muhammad taught this, then, and I believe this, so he must be a prophet.
Yeah.
So they had me go say the Shahada, and the next morning, I woke up in the morning, and I was like, okay, well, I can either pretend that never happened, you know what I mean, and go
Hmm.
about my life, or I can like be serious and try to live as a Muslim and be a Muslim. And I said, I'm going to be a Muslim.
And when was this? This was
1992, August
1992.
1992.
August 1992.
Yeah.
And that was before you moved to the area here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was 19, and I so I had a friend. I ended up, I'm going to the masjid, and I had a friend who knew Imam Zaid Shakir. He had been, because Imam Zaid, who's now at Zaytuna Institute,
Hmm.
he was an imam in Connecticut, and the brother, African American brother, had just moved from Connecticut to St. Louis, so he had been with Imam Zaid Masjid. You know what I'm saying? And he's telling me about Imam Zaid. And he had the tapes of him, cassette tapes and stuff, and he's like, we got to go visit him. I want to take you to him.
Yeah.
So we made a road trip up there, and I met Imam Zaid. Alhamdulillah, again, like 92. I'd been Muslim for like a month, and he tells me, that he had gone. I was just talking with him, and he had gone to American University in D.C.
Mm-hmm.
That's where he had gotten his, I don't know, bachelor's or master's or something. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to apply to American University too. You know what I mean? And another thing, though,
Following his footsteps.
yeah, exactly. I just kind of like, yeah, and I was just finishing my second year of community college in St. Louis.
Yeah.
So I was like going to transfer, just like you were mentioning. You know what I mean? So I'm like, where am I going to transfer to? So I applied to two places. I applied to University of Chicago and American University, and University of Chicago didn't accept me, but AU did.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, pack my stuff. I'm in DC. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? That's how I landed in DC.
Oh, wow.
In '93. So this is '93 that I
that you came here.
Yeah.
And then, okay. So you were in 92 and then came to DC in 93.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had visited DC before because we had a massive protest against the war in Bosnia. And that was in DC. It was like a march from I don't know
how they do it now, like
how they do it now.
Yeah.
Exactly, from like Lafayette Park, whatever, to to the White House or something, or Congress to the White House. So I had met like some brothers from DC, and I was like, wow, I like the community out there.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a real community. So I was like, came out here with some expectations of like not only the Muslim community, but also and like getting my political science degree, but also like
the activism community.
The activism, yes, there's the activism, and also there's another thing, which is like the DC punk scene at the time, like, was legendary.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of had a little bit of that. I was still kind of like, oh, maybe I can go like to some shows and stuff. And the funny thing is, right, I did go to a couple punk shows, you know what I mean? And I was just like, it was funny because my heart was, at that time, was like starting to get closer to like the Quran and stuff. And it just like, it felt empty to me. You know what I mean? It was so weird. It was like I didn't even have the choice anymore of like the struggle, like Allah had put in me, that just my heart did not respond to it anymore.
Yeah.
But my heart was responding to the masjid. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So you're like at those concerts, you're like, your body was there,
yeah,
but your soul
exactly.
wasn't.
My body was there. But I just like, and these people are drinking over here, and I'm just like, I don't belong here. Yeah.
It's not my scene anymore.
It's not my scene anymore.
Yeah.
I just didn't belong. That was the weird. I just didn't belong. I felt like an outsider. I felt like a sore thumb. I was like, I just kind of leave. It's weird.
Oh, that's beautiful. SubhanAllah. Like, from being a Christian and being like going to Christian schools, and then going to becoming an atheist and kind of rebelling, drugs, all that type of stuff. Yeah. But I feel like that happened in like very quickly. Like, you went from like being like rebellious at like 12, 13, and then when you're maybe like 16, you're in high school, and then maybe like 17, you started coming back to trying to figure out the beginning of the arc, the redemption arc, things like that. It all happened very quickly in such a short span of time.
It's so funny because, so you're 19.
Yeah.
Okay. So me at the time, I was 19 when I converted. You know what I mean? The thing about it is it seemed like a lifetime.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like at the time.
Yeah. It feels for me right now that I've lived like
exactly. Yeah, it seemed like, so I'm like, okay, like, so 12, 13, I started getting rebellious. I'm now 19 and I'm converting, and I went through a process there, but like now it's like 6 years. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's still a long time for me, but like my oldest son, my youngest son is 4. You know what I mean? So that's like really kind of that lifetime, you know what I mean? It's like, SubhanAllah, it seemed like a long time at the time. It's, but it really
now they look back.
Now I look back.
Everything happened.
Yeah.
So let's kind of skip forward a little bit, and kind of go towards more of like what happened with 9/11. Because as a revert, I know as Muslims how that kind of how not necessarily how Muslims were treated at that time. And I know a lot of people, even Muslims, who would change their names to become more kind of to not be associated with Islam as much, just because of the harassment they would get. Yeah. So you as a weaver, you hadn't been a weaver for what, like 7-8 years at that point.
Well, 92, so it's more than 10 years. Almost 10 years. Almost 10 years. Yeah.
How was that? How did that kind of play a role? Did that kind of strengthen your kind of relationship with the Quran, with Allah, or was that also like a changing point in your life? So
I think that we got to fill in some gaps there between 93 when I come out here and then that, right? So, because in order for my answer to make sense, I gotta fill in some things. So, the viewers may not know, not everyone may know, but like around 91, 92, so like right around the time that I was, starting to convert, there was, a major war started. I mentioned Bosnia. So basically the Serbs and the Croats launched a genocidal war attack on Bosnian Muslims, and so we started getting all these refugees coming into St. Louis from Bosnia, and this, because there was a refugee resettlement agency in St. Louis, so they were bringing in all these Bosnians, and so like I'm at the masjid, and they're looking for volunteers to help with these refugees, So I was like, yeah, sure, So I started helping with them, and I'm started following. I remember I had been like super activist on like Guatemala or whatever, So now here's like Muslims, and I'm like, what's going on with them, And I'm like, as I'm helping like take them to the doctor, move furniture from someone who donated it to up a flight of up a fire escape, I'm moving a couch up a fire escape, and I'm doing all this crazy stuff to help them, and and they're like, oh, you have to sit down and drink coffee with us, and so I started realizing that like these folks were like super traumatized, like women had been raped, people were telling me stories about like their neighbors who were their friends were suddenly persecuted them and tried to kill them and chase them out of their town, and I was like really, really caught up in that story, and at the same time, right, the war in Afghanistan from the Soviet invasion, was just winding down. Actually, like the Soviets had fled, had left, but there were still communist Afghans that were part of like the war there, and we had like videotapes floating around of like mujahideen from the Afghans fighting the communists and stuff. And this is all from like the late 80s, but people still had, and actually like early 90s, because the war was still going on when I converted. So I'm watching like these videotapes, of like these mujahideen, and then like I'm talking to these Bosnians, and I'm like, and remember, I'm the guy like who won't, I'm not the guy who gets bullied. You know what I'm saying? I had made a conscious decision that even though I'm not like internally like Mr. Tough Guy, I'm gonna like fight. You know what I'm saying? So I say to myself, and I was also like Mr. Activist. So all this comes together to where I'm like, I'm gonna go to Bosnia and fight. You know what I mean? That was like just, it occurred, and there was no one like telling me I should do that. As a matter of fact, the opposite. There were a lot of people telling me, don't do that. You got a whole life ahead of you. Go to college, be like a spokesperson for our cause or something like that. But don't, go put your life in danger. No one could tell me anything. Like when
Your mind was set.
My mind was set. And this, especially after I got to DC. So when I got to DC, I met some brothers who were telling me more about like Mujahideen fighting in Bosnia and stuff, because there were actually, as it turns out, there were people coming from all over the Muslim world going to Bosnia to help and volunteer and stuff. And you got to understand, this is before, like, these are not really, like, there were some people who were like extremists, but at the time, this is before like the disease of like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and these guys who really have a very twisted ideology. They actually do. It was before that was really widespread. You know what I'm saying? Like the actual like, it was like actual real like freedom fighters, you know what I'm saying, going to help ordinary people just like me, you know what I mean? So I wind up getting a passport and getting a ticket and flying to I flew to Slovenia, and then I took the bus. I had some connections because these refugee families, and I took the bus into Bosnia, into the war zone, and boom, like, got hooked up with Mujahideen, like fighting, because the Bosnian army was like, oh, you're from where? You're Muslim, you're American. Okay, you got to go with the foreigners, and the foreigners were mostly Arabs, mostly, not all, but mostly. So so I wound up, it took a little while for me to, but I forgot to mention that while I was planning all this, I started working at this organization called the World Assembly of Muslim Youth, which was a Saudi Dawah organization. I'm doing that while I'm like in college, you know what I'm saying? So you got to understand, like, there's all this stuff, like I'm trying to go to college, but I'm also like real obsessed with what's happening in Bosnia. And I'm also like, at the time, like working at this Islamic organization. Then I keep hearing about a new organization that just started called CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations. So I'm like, I went there and like gave them my resume, and which was like very thin. It was like ice cream shop. Honestly, like at the time, like I was like, that was my resume. And ice cream shop, Victoria's Ice Cream in St. Louis and World Assembly Muslim Youth. That was the two things on my resume. So they hired me. They hired me, and it was like 3 people. It was Nihad, Ibrahim, and they didn't know that I was like planning to go to Bosnia
Yeah.
at the time. They just hired me to do, and I tell you what, it was so beautiful working with them, and they had such a vision, and energy, and you could really feel that
Hmm.
this was going to be something, and it was a real blessing to work for them. But then I boom disappeared. I go off to Bosnia.
So you can say that you were kind of the one of the first people
I
that worked
was
with care.
I was one of the first people. Yeah, it was Nihad, Ibrahim, Hooper, and it was a brother. Actually, it was the brother who organized. Ironically, it was the brother who organized the Bosnia March. Yeah, Imran Hussein, who passed away unfortunately of pneumonia a few years back. But one of the pillars of the DC Muslim community,
Hmm.
he was like he would answer phones.
Yeah.
So that was care. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And I came in there, like my job was to like organize the files. So they just moved. Nihad had just moved from Texas, so he had a whole bunch of files on like Palestine and
So
what
it was
was
very entry level, just kind of
yeah, very entry level.
yeah.
Like I was just like organizing stuff, but then they had me doing other things, which was kind of, let's say, like internal to care at the time, that I don't know if I have nothing crazy. I just
Yeah.
just things that they had me doing. It was a lot of fun. It was very exciting. Like I felt like I was really helping the Muslims,
Hmm.
And so anyway, I go off to Bosnia. I joined the Mujahideen. Uh, I had never touched a gun before in my life. I got training in, weapons, AK-47 and PK and RPG, and how to like demine, like like look out for mines, take
Hmm.
mines out of the ground, and alhamdulillah, like ended up engaging in some battles and so on, and then the war ended in '95. The war ended because the Serbs had carried out like another massacre, and NATO came and bombed the Serbs around Sarajevo, and that pushed the Serbs back. At the same time, the Muslims and the Croats did like a joint, operation that had the Serbs just running back. And America came in and imposed this Dayton peace agreement, and the war was over. So you got to understand, like at this time, I had just like been in war. I mean,
Hmm.
like I had I'd been been shot at people, the Serbs. I had, mortars falling on me. I'm like, protecting old women and, children and stuff, and, in villages, and, and um, I was in a very strange state, and also very high level of iman, because I'm like, all my fellow people were all like students at Islamic University of Medina, and you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
so we're like, it's like constant like durus, and and constant like dhikr, and and the level of iman when you're going into a battle, it's very
In the face
high.
of death, basically.
Facing
Yeah.
death, yeah, and that's the other thing is like, again, like I'm like, am I going to be the guy who runs away? You know what I mean? No, that's not me. You know what I mean? Like it was like you
Uh,
face
I'm
yourself.
not gonna be bullied.
I'm not going to be bullied.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like I'm not a tough guy. You know what I mean? I'm really not. But it's just like you make a decision to say that's not who I am, to be the guy who's going to be. So it was just like, um, it was, anyway. I'm finding out who I am, through all this, and I came home. I came back to St. Louis, and then I came back to DC to go back to school, because I
This
had like
was
dropped out in
in
American University. I dropped out,
which year?
So I came back in '95.
95.
Yeah, I came back in '95, and then this is going from '95 into '96. And so I'm back at school. I started working at American. So I went back to care, but they're like, they didn't have a position. They didn't know where I was, where I
Hmm.
had been. I went to American Muslim Council, which was a really important organization at the time, another kind of political activist Muslim organization. And I worked with like, if anyone knows, like Professor Intisar Rab over at Harvard. At the time, she like worked. She was from DC, so at the time, like she was just like a young girl.
Hmm.
Really, she's probably younger than me. She's probably 17, 18. We worked together, and she's now a famous like professor of Islamic studies and so on. So I worked there, and I started feeling like I'm missing something. I'm missing like um, the meaning in my life. You know what I mean? It was like everyone's running around like worried about very petty things. I'm like, don't you realize that like life is way more important than that?
Hmm.
And like, don't you know that we could die at any time? And don't you know that like it's very hard to describe how hard it was to get back to normal life after a life of like
Yeah.
war and jihad and so on, and so I go back to Bosnia. I go back there and I'm like, I'm going to work in some kind of relief agency or something like that. So I just dropped out of school again, left everything, and I went back, and I was really crushed because when I got back there, like life is returning to normal. And it sounds weird, but it's like I was kind of disappointed that there was no war anymore. You know what I mean? Which is crazy because war is like, it means death and destruction. And it means, you know what I mean? But it still, it meant meaning, and it meant, and I'm like looking for the brothers. Where's the brothers at? Some people are working like at a halal meat store or, whatever. And it's like everyone's kind of fading back into normalcy, And so this is the really important thing, is that like I did not. I had a longing for that I continued to chase for years, which actually kind of messed me up. You know what I mean? I got married in Bosnia, and I alhamdulillah married a very religious girl, and came back to America. When I realized that what I was looking for was not there. We got married and we had kids. I mean, I got married there, we brought her back, we had kids, started having kids, and I started working at CARE again at that time. So I worked at CARE. This is now like 97. So I worked at CARE from 97 all the way until 9/11. So that's now, by the way, before 9/11 happens, I have to mention to you that there's a couple other things that happen. One is Kosovo. So the the Serbs invade the area of Kosovo, and they started genocide against the Albanians in Kosovo. I said, okay, this is my time again. Yeah, this is my calling, Boom, I pick up and I leave. And my wife's like,
where'd you go?
Where are you going? And we have a child, you know what I mean? At the time we had one
Yeah.
kid, and she was mad, but I'm like, no, this is,
understandably so.
Yeah, and I'm young too, I'm young, and I'm not thinking clearly, and I go off and I try to get in with the Mujahideen, but things were different there than they were in Bosnia, and the Albanians were like communists, and they didn't want Muslims, coming, and so I came back disappointed. I didn't get what I wanted, and then the Soviets the Russians invaded Chechnya for the second time in 99. So this was during Ramadan, and I remember looking over at my friend. So by the way, this time we were going to classes. We had Sheikh Jafar Idris, who was a major scholar in this area from Sudan. This is what I have to mention too at the time, is that like during that whole era, this area was like a hub of Islamic knowledge, activity, life, not just activism. There was that element, but it was like there was ilm here. There were like ulama here. There were institutes. There were there was a really, really rich dawah. There was a really, really rich life, Islamic life here, which, it's not here anymore.
Really?
I have to say it's not here. I'm not to denigrate. There's a lot of lovely people. Exactly.
Relatively.
Yeah. There were people moving from all over the country in the same way that, like, I think, a lot of people doing that, like in Texas, a lot of people moving to Texas or something like that. At the in Dallas area or whatever, because Imam Omar Suleiman and Yasser Qadi and all that are out there, doing something. Here at the time, it was like that, you know what I mean? And like Halalco, I don't know if you know Halalco, but Halalco was like, it's so weird, it's so different, And another thing is, it was really nice for a Muslim family. Like, you had a Muslim family, like a young Muslim family. There were all kinds of people just like you.
Yeah.
Young people, cared about the deen, trying to learn Islam. You could go with your wife to the classes. You could go with, your wife had friends. You had friends.
Your kids had Muslim friends.
But kids had Muslim friends. It was like, it was really a amazing time to be here, And so me and the brother, I saw this brother at the class, and I was like, I looked at him, I said, I'm really thinking to go to Chechnya. He said, you know what, me too. It's a brother from Yemen. I said, let's do it together. He's like, okay. So me and him, we started planning. We're going to go to Chechnya. We're going to join the Chechen Mujahideen, and we're going to fight the Russians. You know what I mean? Again, you got to remember. So this is like after like Al-Qaeda carried out some attacks in 98 in Africa. But for us, like, that was like a weird group. It was like, you know what I mean? Like we were at the time, we were like Salafis, For us, that was like a weird group. It was like You know what I mean? Like, what are these? Who are these people? And like, why are they blowing up like embassies? And for us, it was like, Islam was like, just in its warfare, and you know what I mean, like the most noble, and because we're studying the hadith of the Prophet about jihad and stuff. So anyway, we end up. It turns out, right, this is how life goes. It turns out that we couldn't go straight to Chechnya because they wouldn't accept people who didn't already have military training. And I did, but the Yemeni brother didn't. You know what I mean? So we had heard that there was this Mujahideen group in Kashmir who would, train people, and then we could get to Chechnya from there. So we go off. Yeah, exactly. So we go off to Kashmir. So I'm in Kashmir. I'm like, firing anti-aircraft guns at the Indians across the line of control in Kashmir and stuff. And I end up getting like horrible like dysentery, like really bad food poisoning, and I'm out for a month. A month of barely being conscious. Like I don't even remember. The time was just like. And when I came to, I was like, you know what? And my wife was mad at me. She's like calling. She's in Bosnia at the time, and like had gone back to Bosnia. We had 2 kids at the time. She's we're talking. She's mad at me, and I'm sick, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm done. You know what I mean?
What am I doing here?
What am I doing here?
Yeah.
Like I'm done. You know what I mean?
Another moment of realization when, who are you?
Exactly. Like, who are you? Yeah. Right. Like, who are you?
You're asking yourself this.
I'm asking myself, and also like I'm a little bit older now. Like I'm now like that point. I think I was like 26 or something. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, but what I will do, because I still like. There's a mystique about Mujahideen and about the people fighting for Islam. I'm gonna help them out with like some I'm gonna set up like an internet newsletter for them. At the time, it was like real rudimentary internet. It was like 99 or 2000, something like that. But I'm like, so I started working for them and like writing essays on like Kashmir and whatever else.
Remote work.
Exactly. Yeah, from home. Like I go home. And but see, the thing is, their training camp, they're like, send people to us, So I'm like, okay, so like I would tell brothers, remember again that there's this like real active young people, in our area, and we're all like watching Chechnya and what's happening there, and everyone's excited. I'm like, I can help you get to Kashmir if you want to go like get training and fire guns and be with Mujahideen and stuff. And so I end up like sending like a whole bunch of people to go there. But you got to realize that I did not think that anything I was doing was illegal. I mean, I had been to Bosnia, I'd been to Kosovo, I'd been like, I just thought that I was like, I knew this was not like a mainstream kind of activity. You know what I'm saying?
It's not the typical hobby.
It's not the typical hobby.
Like going and hiking.
Exactly. But at the same time, it was like, I didn't think it was illegal, And now, so among our group of brothers, like we had like a real tight group of brothers. We used to do a whole bunch of activities together, we would go, canoeing, we would go horseback riding. We all had like SUVs, like, so we'd go off-road, when SUVs used to be real SUVs, not these like, soccer mom things, they call SUVs. I mean, like trucks actually, like we'd go off-roading. This one brother had like 250 acres of swampland that his uncle had left him in Spotsylvania. Yeah. So we used to go out there and like, go off-roading, go hunting. We all had weapons and stuff, rifles, and our main thing was like paintball. We all had paintball guns. We'd go out there and play paintball, and anyway, all that's going on, and then 9/11. So 9/11 happens. I'm working at CARE at the time. Our offices, I mean, like, when the plane hit the Pentagon. First of all, we're watching on TV when the first tower hits. It's like, oh boy, what I mean? I hope this wasn't a terror. That was always like our fear. Like, I hope this is not a terrorist attack. I hope this wasn't Muslims. The second plane hits, we know it's a terrorist attack at that point. And then the plane hits the Pentagon, which is right near our office. You know what I mean? And, it's just like my heart sank. You got to understand, it's not just that I was a Muslim at 9/11. You know what I mean? I was a Muslim at 9/11 who, number one, was helping people go fight, in Kashmir and train in Kashmir and all this. So, and also I was a Muslim who was really heavily involved in CARE in trying to help Muslims get along in
Yeah.
America. You know what I mean? Like establish rights for Muslims.
You saw that, and you
I
just
saw that. I saw it
everything
evaporate.
vanished. Yeah.
I saw it evaporate. I said to myself, like there's an interview, several interviews with me, because we're all like doing media interviews, like, so interviews with me at the time, saying like, this, everything we worked for has gone up in smoke, and I mean, it was like crazy. Like, so, do you know who Zakir Naik is? Dr. Zakir Naik?
I've heard the name.
Yeah, so he's like a well-known like Indian Muslim like speaker and like debater on Islam and stuff like this. He had visited our office. At that time, he was not well known, but he had visited our office, and he sent us like a video. Like, well, we had like a package that came to our office like the day after 9/11, and we're like rattling it. You know what I mean? Like, it's like we actually literally called the FBI and had them come with a robot, and the robot like took the package apart in the alley behind our office, and it turned out to be like a videotape that Zakir Naik had sent us, like just as like a gift for having been. So it was
the delivery time on that is just
I know it was like real. We had DC police surrounding our office and looking at us, just staring at us, and we're like, are they there to protect us, or are they to watch us? You know what I mean? Like, it was, they had Humvees with soldiers on every corner in DC. You know what I mean? There was, they're going around to Muslims' houses. I mean, I lived in Falls Church.
Yeah.
As it happens, like a couple of the hijackers had lived in Falls Church.
And they went to Dar al-Hijra.
And went to Dar al-Hijra, which Dar al-Hijra was in my backyard, literally in my backyard. I lived in the apartments right next to Dar al-Hijra. So I'm like, so there's a Kinko. This old thing used to be called Kinko's, like a Staples, where you could go and like rent a computer. It sounds so weird now, but like you could go and like pay them, and you could use a computer like for the internet or to print stuff or whatever. So apparently, and I've never actually seen this mentioned in any reporting about it, but apparently the hijackers had used those computers. So I went in to get like a passport photo. And the FBI is there seizing the computers at the Kinkos, you know what I mean? And I'm like trying to talk to the dude, and the FBI guy's like, I'm talking to him, you know what I mean? Get out of here, Then right now, all right, so lots of things are happening, lots of turmoil. We're trying to figure out, like, first of all, we as a group, us, we did not in any way support the 9/11 thing. Like, we were just like, this is. I mean, obviously, to us, it was so obvious this is haram. I mean, it's so obvious. It's not only haram, even if it's not haram, and it is, it's like, we didn't ask you to do this, you morons. You know what I mean? Like, this is hurting what our efforts, what we're trying to do in America, you know what I mean? And da'wah and everything like that. And man, it was just like, I got to tell you, like, how crushing. And how, like, what do we do? Like, that was like the whole thing, is like, what do we do? So we asked a local scholar, like, to explain to us, like, what he thinks we should do, and he's like, well, you guys should all leave America, because there's going to be, like, Muslims are going to be persecuted, and you're going to be, you know what I mean? So I end up like, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go to Pakistan, because that was my go-to place of where to go, you know what I mean? And, and a whole bunch of other brothers asked me to help them get to Pakistan. So I like made phone calls. I'm like, hey, can you all meet these guys at the airport? And I'm calling the Mujahideen in Pakistan and say, now you got to understand that this is in Kashmir. This is the opposite side. It's not Afghanistan. This is all like 3 days after 9/11. Okay. So the idea was not, we're going to go help fight Americans.
We're just trying to get out of
We're just trying to get out of America, and we're trying to go somewhere like a hijrah thing. You know what I mean? In retrospect, obviously this is an incredibly stupid idea.
On the phones when your
I'm
phones
on
are
the
being
phone.
tapped.
Yeah, actually, as it happens, we were being tapped.
Yeah.
By the NSA. Without a warrant, they're wiretapping us. So, as I mentioned to you, we all had guns. So I'm like, first of all, I'm making moves to leave. I've got passports. I've got everything like in a briefcase. As I'm getting like, and at that point I had 3 kids, you know what I mean? So like and my wife and I'm, getting all our stuff ready to leave. And I decide that I'm going to go to the gun store and sell my gun. I had a AK that was like, tricked out. I mean, it looked like, a military weapon, you know what I mean? So I take it into the, gun store used to be in Alexandria. It's not there anymore, but Potomac Arms. I go in there to try to sell it, and they're like offered me some real low price, which was like would have been a ripoff. I'm like, no, I'll go somewhere else to try to sell it. So I drive away and I get pulled over. So I get pulled over by Alexandria police, and
This is like not even a week after.
no, yeah, not even a week. The Pentagon is still on fire.
Yeah.
This Pentagon is burning. And I'm in Alexandria. I'm right near the Pentagon. You know what I mean? Like, 2 minutes. And I kind of laughed when I got pulled over because I'm like, oh, this looks
over.
Really, yeah, exactly. I'm like, this looks really bad.
How can this get any worse?
How can this get any worse, right? So
Little did you know.
Little did I know it would get much worse. So he comes and he's like, you don't have a city sticker on your car. I don't know if that's why he really pulled me over. Or maybe he was watching me. I don't know. But I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. He's like, what's that in your trunk? And it was a rifle in a case. I said, oh, that's my rifle. I said, you're welcome to look at it, because there was nothing illegal about it.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I'm going to look at it. I said, okay, yeah, you're welcome to. So I popped I had a Pathfinder, popped the trunk, the hatchback, and he's looking at it and he starts freaking out. He's like, because it looks so scary. You know what I'm saying? He opens up my briefcase and he sees all these passports and Social Security cards and plane tickets. You know what I mean? Plane tickets. You know what I mean? So he ends up calling like every federal agency. I don't know. It was in a strip mall. So they block off the whole strip mall, with like unmarked black Suburbans. And I mean, they've got like so many Suburbans. I'm like, is this necessary? You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm just like, this is so crazy, because it really does look bad.
Yeah.
I had a Quran, and he was like, why do you have a Quran in your car? I said, well, same reason you might have a Bible in your car. You know what I mean? We're going back and forth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Anyway, they arrest me for not having a city sticker on my car. That's what they arrest me for. Yeah. So they take me in, and I called my lawyer and brother Ashraf Nubani, lovely brother, still out there being a lawyer. Man, so they released me because they don't have anything on me. And like, but right, they park an FBI car permanently, like it's parked outside my car, outside my apartment, my townhouse, and they're going around asking neighbors about me. Like, I can see them, like I can see what's happening. You know what I mean? It's like I am, they're doing it on purpose. They're following me around. Like, like I can,
like,
I know I'm being followed. They're letting me know that they are following me. They're following me as I'm walking through DC. They're following me, and I was just like, well, I had plane tickets. I was just, boom, I left. I left. And at the time, like the whole plane security thing was not like it is now.
Yeah.
I was just like, got on a plane and left. And with my wife and kids and stuff. And I stayed gone for like 8 months. The Pakistanis wouldn't give me a visa, so I went to Bosnia. So I'm in Bosnia, and my dad's calling me. I'm talking to my dad pretty regularly, and he's like, the FBI has been calling and asking about you, and you know what I mean, all this, I'm like, well, tell them to talk to my lawyer, and after a while, like I'm living overseas for like 8 months, and I can't explain why, but I just felt like I wanted to come back, and
homesick.
I was homesick, you know what I mean? I was homesick, and I was also starting to feel a little stupid, because this sheikh who had advised us to leave, he like, stayed in America and got his PhD while I'm, you know what I mean? Like, doing nothing, where I'm at. And I was bored too. I didn't have anything to do. So I come back, and the other brothers who I'd helped go to Pakistan, they also like eventually came back, and we're bopping around town, like living our lives, with one difference, that the FBI is following us everywhere. You know what I mean? And the FBI is asking everyone about us. And, people are coming up to me saying, who I know are working for the FBI, and they're wired, and they're trying to ask me questions. And it was a very difficult existence. You know what I mean? And
you're still working with CARE at the time?
So at that time, CARE was aware that I was being like investigated and stuff, and they didn't want to have anything to do with me. And I can't blame them at all. I mean, like, this is all my own fault. At the time, I was working for MASS as the National Communications Director, and did a lot of good at MASS at the time. And because I was trying to like get my life on track, and I had like a vision for Muslim activism in America, and I had learned, by the way, from, again, like who am I? You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm not the dude who's running around I'm like, I'm a father, a stable father. I want to raise my children. I want to do something good for Muslims in America. I want to do something good for America because I was like, this is my people, and I want to do da'wah. I want to, I didn't want to be the guy anymore who was like, and I realized too that like I was chasing something that like, look, that was a time in my life. That was a period. That was like something good that I did. You know what I mean? But it was over. You know what I mean? It's like the guy who peaks in high school and like, he's like, 40 years old and he's still talking about how he was,
the captain of
the captain of the football team. You know what I mean? It's like, move on with your life, and, and I definitely was not any kind of like extremist. In fact, had never been, you know what I mean? Really, I was just kind of, I wanted to help the Muslims. You know what I mean? It was like naive.
Pre 9/11, that type of stuff. It was
normal.
Much different. And
different. And that's the other thing about 9/11 is that it ruined so much. You asked me about what it was like on 9/11. This is what it was like on 9/11. The day after 9/11, all of a sudden the Muslims were like the enemy. You know what I mean? All of a sudden the Muslims, and it's like we did not ask for that. You know what I mean? We were put in that position. You know what I mean? And on the one hand, yes, you can blame America, for, oh, well, people were prejudiced. But really, like if that 9/11 had happened in like Serbia, they would have like slaughtered every Muslim, you know what I mean? Or China or something. They would have been like, oh yeah. You know what I mean? If it had happened in America, like they put Japanese in camps at one point, you know what I mean? So actually like America had kind of, gotten to a place. Now, that's not to deny that things got ugly and that there were like demagogues and people who tried to like scapegoat Muslims, all Muslims, and that was not fair. You know what I'm saying? For sure. But like, we gotta like ask ourselves, like, I mean, there are people who called themselves Muslims, who claim to be doing this in the name of Islam, who committed a horrible attack. It's like we got to live with the consequences of that. And so, it was just really, really, it was really bad. It was really bad after 9/11. It was really bad, and it's just because. Anyway, so 2003 comes around. I learned that I'm going to be indicted. I'm going to be indicted, and I'm probably going to go to prison.
Do you know what for?
So I did learn because they raided my house. They raided my house, and they raided like the houses of like almost all of the brothers who were involved in like the paintball. You know what I mean? And including the people who went to Pakistan, but not only them, also just people who had just been playing paintball with us. You know what I mean? They raided us, and they said on the search warrant what they were investigating was material support for terrorism. So I knew that was going to be one of the things that I was going to be indicted for. And then Newsweek, so my lawyer, I was actually happened to be at my lawyer's office when Newsweek called and said, hey, they thought I was him. They said, we hear that your client is going to be indicted on Monday. Is going to be arrested on Monday. Do you have any comment?
And you still didn't know?
No, I knew now at this point, like someone in the FBI has leaked to the media that I'm going to be arrested on Monday.
Did you know before then that you were
going to be arrested? I knew I was going to be arrested, but I didn't know when. I didn't know when. And so we set up a news conference for Friday. This was like Thursday. We set up a news conference for the next day at the National Press Club where we're going to have all our lawyers and our family are going to denounce the FBI for harassing us just for playing paintball. Now, this was a tactic because I was not just playing paintball. You know what I mean? But there were others who were being arrested just for playing paintball. You know what I mean? So we were trying to like get a jump on it. So the FBI learned that we were going to do a news conference on Friday. So they arrested us Friday morning. You know what I mean? But I'll tell you what, Thursday night, it's so funny because I went to go pick up some things at the Shoppers Food Warehouse, which doesn't exist anymore. But it was in if anyone knows, like Seven Corners area, like on Route 7, and like, so there's like Route 7 and Patrick Henry, and like Darrell Hydro's right there. You know what I'm saying? And there's a shopping center right there. There's like a Red Robin and stuff. There used to be a grocery store like they're called Shoppers Food Warehouse, and I went to the Shoppers and to pick up some stuff, and I'm like dead man walking. That's how I felt, like dead man walking. Like I thought I was gonna be arrested Monday. I didn't realize it was gonna be the very next day. You know what I'm saying? But I remember like walking and like in the checkout aisle where they got the candy bars and stuff, and I'm just like looking at the candy. Yeah, the last time, so I buy a candy bar, and I'm like, this is the last time I'm gonna,
Go to
Of
this
course,
for I don't know how long.
yeah. Turns out they do have candy bars in prison, but the point is, this is the last time I'm in this grocery store where I
Yeah.
have the freedom to, like, and I saw a sister that I knew, that she was actually the sister of a good friend of mine. And I saw her and I said, Salam alaikum. She was with her mom.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, Salam alaikum. And, she's like, I heard that you're having some problems or whatever. I was like, yeah, well, anyway, Salam alaikum. And I went home with my wife and we had a beautiful evening with the family, and 6 o'clock in the morning, bam, 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 bam,
FBI,
FBI,
open up.
FBI, open up. They come in, boom, with the, the thing, knock the door down. They come in like, guns, pointed, MP5s, pistols. My daughter like came out and was like sitting on the couch. My daughter at the time, my oldest daughter was like 3, or 4. She was 4. She's sitting on the couch, just like watching everything. And I'm like, don't shoot. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I just didn't want them shooting. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
put my hands up and, they take me off. And that's the last time I was free for another 13 and a half years.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was that on your kids and your wife?
Very
I
hard.
don't.
Very hard.
I don't
So
we're
hard.
gonna get into like the more
No, it's
what
okay.
happened with like the prison life, but I just want to understand.
Yeah,
like,
no,
kinda,
it's unimaginable. I mean, my wife knew that I was going to be arrested
Yeah.
too, and she was so mad at me. She's just like, your choices. These are your choices that you made. And it didn't help it. I'm like, oh, it's fi sabilillah.
Mm-hmm.
It's true, it's for fi sabilillah, but you don't do stupid things,
Yeah.
pointless things.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like you have good intentions. You know what I mean? You have good intentions, but I'm not really benefiting anyone. Like no one benefited from all that stuff. In Bosnia, yes. You know what I mean? Like Bosnia is one thing. Even, but after that, it's like you have to be,
It was
why?
you chasing.
I was chasing,
that, like it's the
exactly.
that feeling that
I was chasing that feeling.
Yeah.
Now, look, I will say that I think it's a noble feeling to be like you want to do something meaningful in your life. You want to do something that's rewarding, because there is reward for, you know what I mean, and for that, and but at the same time, it's like
there's different types.
There's different types, and I was not called upon.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you're there's Muslims in the areas around those areas who can go to those things. Like it wasn't something that I was called upon to do. You know what I mean? So anyway, the point is, I realized that like, so I'm sitting in like the FBI's, holding, they're building down in DC, they're fingerprinting me, and then I go I'm taken for my like into federal court for my arraignment, and I'm just like, this is all like totally new to me. You know what I mean? I'm like sitting there in a jail jumpsuit, standing in front of a federal judge who looked like, I mean, to me at the time, it was like she was like, 20 feet in the air, her bench, the bench, that she's at, and the prosecutor is over there like just mocking me, and like he's obviously like my biggest enemy. You know what I'm saying?
And he can say whatever at the end
he
of
can
the
say
day.
whatever. I mean, he's making me out to be like, I don't consider now that he's my enemy and all that. I mean, because I made those choices, but at the time it was like, that's what it was. I mean, it's like the meanest guy in the world. You know what I mean? It's just like making me out to be like, so then I go for I'm like, then the next morning, I wake up in jail and I open up the Washington Post, because they used to give us the Washington Post, and there's like me, like this court sketch artist has drawn me as like a monster. I mean, honestly, like I'm like, what is this? I mean,
who is this?
Yeah, I'm like, who is this? This
says my name, but
exactly.
It's not me.
They've made my face like, like I'm like, I don't look like that. I'm not a mean guy.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is all a huge misunderstanding. You know what I'm saying? To be honest, yeah. I mean, like, and but my kids, because you're not allowed. First, I was in Alexandria jail, so it's not that far from where I live, so they can kind of come on visiting hours and stuff. But I'm behind glass. I can't touch them. I can't hug them. My wife is at the time like, so young. She's a mother of 4 kids, and she doesn't even know how to drive. You know what I mean? She doesn't speak English.
Yeah.
She's like, I mean, barely speaks English. You know what I mean? It's like, what on earth is she going to do? You know what I mean? Like, what are we going to do? And then I tried to get out on bail. I did, by the way, I was totally new to the whole jail, I mean, like criminal law, system. And the judge, denies my bail. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to sit here until trial. And I just keep thinking that like, all right, well, I'll do like a couple of years or something and I'll come out. And like, I didn't realize that I was facing life. And my lawyer's like, no, you're not getting out in a couple of years. You know what I mean? Like laughing at me,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm it's like sinking in that like this is, this is like life now. Life is now this. And and then the pressure starts to like testify against the other people, and they put pressure on them to testify
Mm-hmm.
against us. So now where we were friends and brothers, now everyone's like suspicious of one another. And then a bunch of them, plead guilty and then testify again. They do it superseding indictment, and now I'm charged with like material support for Al Qaeda. I'm charged with like seditious conspiracy, treason. I'm charged with treason. I'm charged with conspiring to contribute uh, um, goods and resources to territory controlled by the Taliban. I'm charged with like so many gun charges. I'm charged with aiding and abetting the use of guns by everyone that I helped go to this, Pakistan camp.
Mm-hmm.
So they get charged for their things, and I get charged with their things, and I get charged for my own gun, which they said was used in furtherance of a crime of violence. What was the crime of violence? The conspiracy to violate the neutrality laws of the United
There was
States.
just a bunch of different
It was
stuff
like
that
I was like, I had to go look up all these laws in the law library in the jail.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't even understand what all these things were. And then like when I'm adding up all the years, I'm like, this is life in prison. And I ended up pleading guilty to firearms and a charge related to an RPG, rocket propelled grenade, and got sentenced to 20 years. There was a lot of drama in all that, but that's the long and short of it.
There's a lot of back and forth.
Yeah, a lot of back and forth, and boom, I'm sent off to prison, and I end up being put into the worst units for like the highest security prison. I mean, I end up in Colorado, ADX, Colorado, which is the highest security prison in the United States.
Wow.
And it's the end of the road. There's no, there's nowhere worse. There's nowhere harsher. There's nowhere more violent. There's nowhere more, I was in solitary for 2.5 years. I mean, imagine that, 2.5 years by yourself. I once in a while would see like a guard or see, you know what I mean? But like,
they're not talking to you.
They're not. Yeah. Well, there's a little bit of that, but nevertheless, I mean, it's like, it's just you and the voice in your head, and for me, my Islam was like, had been for many years, had been like activism.
And now
I'm just
boom.
nothing.
Halted.
Exactly. Halted. So now, like, what is my Islam? You know what I mean? And so that was like an aspect of myself that like I had not really developed. You know what I mean? It was like, what do I believe actually? You know what I mean? And if my Islam is just, a project, an activist project, then like, what is that? What does that leave me when I'm cut off from the project?
Yeah.
And so
once again, you were asking yourself, who is Ismail?
Who am I? Exactly. Who is Ismail? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'll tell you what. Alhamdulillah, I had learned to read the Quran, because I had been going to classes and stuff. And so that's the thing, is that like I have like parallel tracks in my life going on. It's just that like some things are like not developed as much as they should have been. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, I'm going to classes and things, but when I got into that situation where I'm just by myself, alhamdulillah, I had a mushaf, but it was just an all Arabic mushaf, and I'm like, well, let me try to. But I could read, but really, really haltingly. You know what I mean? But I was pretty good with Arabic. You know what I mean? Like and I'm good with languages in general. So like I kind of like understand a lot of what I'm reading anyway.
Yeah.
And I know these because I used to listen to the Quran a lot, so I know the verses, and so I'm like I started like so I came across this verse, the ayah. It says, he says, it's ayat, subhanAllah, surah, I forgot the surah, but anyway, Surah Al-Furqan, I think, it says, is فاطر السماوات فاطر oh man, I can't remember. Anyway, he's the creator of no, he's the splitter of the seed and the splitter of the dawn. So that ayah right there, like changed me. You know what I mean? Like opened my mind up. Why? Because if you look at like how deep this is, like he splits the seed, is it was just like this minuscule little thing. You know what I mean? And then like the dawn. This is like cosmic, scale. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? But he is, so it's just like, so it's, this shows you like he's the Lord of the universe. He's the one who has control over every aspect in his patterns. His patterns are on every scale. You know what I mean? From like the most grandest cosmic, planetary solar scale to the tiniest little thing, and even smaller than that, and even bigger than that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It gave me like the sense of like that. Gave me a sense of comfort and iman. Like it was Allah speaking to me. Really, I mean, this is Allah's speech. Like I know that this is Allah's speech. You know what I mean? And so that like really opened up a new dimension. And I mean, after getting out of prison, you lose all that.
So that was in
2016, the end of 2016. I don't want to say you lose it, but you, you're not as anymore as you're not alone with yourself anymore.
Yeah.
Now I'm back
catching up with life,
the dunya and trying to like, get a job and trying to pay bills and trying to get married again. Alhamdulillah, I did get married again. And I got, had 2 more children, my grown children, but look, the thing is, my whole time in prison, the thing that I had kept in front of me as like a light at the end of the tunnel was that I was going to get out to my family. I was going to get out to my kids. I was going to be able to, be a father to my kids again. And so that like stayed there as every year goes by. The thing about it is, as you're stuck in one place in prison, they're not stuck.
You're still thinking that they're still little kids. You're stuck in one time.
Exactly. I'm stuck in this one time.
And did you see them while you were in prison?
Years would go by that I wouldn't see them. Wow. I mean, I'm in Colorado, I'm in Illinois, I'm in, it's hard for them to come see me. You know? So at one point it was like 3 years or something went by, I didn't see them. And then they would come and see me and I would see that they're growing, you know what I mean? But I would like, in my mind, they would leave and they're still little kids, you know what I mean? And when I got out, it was so hard because it was like, okay, now I'm Baba again. And I'm like, to be Baba, you have to be the one who tells them what to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's how I'm going to be Baba. It's like, okay, no, you don't do that. Don't do that. And that's like the most irritating thing to them in the world. That's the last thing they want. You know what I mean? Like they don't want another adult in their life, because at this point they're like teenagers. You know what I mean? Like my youngest was like 14 and my oldest was like 19. And so like, or 18, and they don't want, they had a stepdad at that point. Like my wife and I had divorced because I had such a long sentence. And so, that was also very hard for me. Like I should not have made it hard for myself. I should have been like, that's the fair and nice thing to do. No, I was Mr., jerk, and made it hard for her and didn't do it, very easily, and finally gave in, you know what I mean? And let go of that. But I was like, oh, now I got my kids, and then when I come out, they've got their mom, they've got their stepdad, and now they got me trying to tell them what to do. And so I burned a lot of bridges with them at first, made them mad at me. And like, no one told, like, they just released me. They didn't tell me like, this is how you're going to reintegrate into your family, into society. I came back out. First of all, you got to understand, like I was telling you that like this area was like a hub of activity and Muslim life and community, and my friends were all here, and my wife and my kids, and I come out, and that's all gone. Like in the meantime, the government persecution crackdown chased all of these ulama away. They all were deported or left voluntarily. I go back to Darul Hijra. No offense to Darul Hijra, you know what I mean? But like, I grew up in Darul Hijra. Like I was like, that was my masjid, like from like age 20 to the age of 30. You know what I mean? Is where I was raised, in that masjid. It was my backyard, and I go there and like people like, are so suspicious. That was the other thing, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's suspicious. Who's this new white dude? You know what I mean? Like, are you Muslim? One guy came and tried to challenge me to make me recite al-Fatiha. Well, you were trying to make me recite al-Fatiha. I
went to prison for
Islam. I went to prison for the Islam.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. That's the other thing. And this is my message. I was going to this masjid before you were even in this country. You know what I mean? And I was so like hurt by that. And I'm going around and I'm seeing all the places where my I used to take my kids to play in the play. No, sorry.
That's all good.
You know, and I go to Halalco. Halalco is closed. At the time they were like moving to another location. You know what I mean? Like it's closed. It's like, there's all the people, like subhanAllah, like I saw a brother, I won't mention who it was, but like I saw a brother that I used to know. He was just one of the fellas, you know what I mean? One of the brothers, you know what I'm saying? I saw him at a store, and he's like in the checkout area, and he's like trying to convince the checkout lady, I'm gonna think, to let him have a bag of onions for free because he can't afford it. The thing is, I know the brother. I mean, like he was one of our, you know what I mean? But now he's like begging at the store for food. You know what I mean? And I say, "Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so what's going on? You know, like, let me get that for you." You know what I mean? And we're talking, and I'm like, "What's going on? How come you're like begging?" You know? And he's like, "Well, my kids grew up, and they don't really see me anymore, and like I kind of fell on hard times. I got sick. I couldn't work anymore." I'm just like, I felt like we're two ghosts, you know what I mean? Like passing each other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That encounter each other in a world that like, it's like, I don't know. It's just like, I felt like I didn't belong, it was really hard, and in my mind, I'm still like, there's these 4 kids somewhere, you know what I mean? Running around the area, and, but they're not, this is not fair to them because they are grown men and women, you know what I mean? They're different. They need someone to take them seriously. And they did have needs that I think a father could have met in my situation, but I didn't know how to do that. You know what I mean? I didn't.
First time going through that.
My first time going through it, and I had no idea like how to deal with it, and it was just really, really. I was working. I had gotten a job mixing concrete, and this job was like, I was on probation, so it was like you had to get a job, it's like that's part of probation, and I had to get a job anyway, like to
live,
and I had gotten like, apparently I didn't realize this, that concrete like has a substance in it that if it gets wet and it touches your skin, it's like burns you. You don't think about that, you know what I mean? But like, so I had gotten like horrible burns all over my arms and chest and body and stuff, and had to go to the hospital. And I'm like in the hospital with like, chemical burns. I'm like, dealing with my kids. I'm like, my mother had died while I was in prison. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like, I was just like, I used to laugh at people who would get released from prison and they'd come right back in. You know what I mean? Because it's like, oh, come on, man. You can't even like get out and like, and would you come back in if we were smoking a joint? Like, that's stupid. Like, what made you want to do that? But then like, I actually realized, why people actually do that on purpose.
Yeah.
They do it on purpose because you get, the human being adapts. The human being adapts to, you move to Antarctica, you'll adapt to Antarctica. You go to prison, it's like a jarring experience. It's so hard at first, especially if you're not a street guy, you know what I mean? But then you get used to it. Like that's your normal, that's your existence. Like I know how to be in prison, but I don't know how to deal with this. You know what I mean? So I started thinking like, man, it's like, should I do something to go back to prison or what? You know what I mean? Because, but anyway, I got to say that alhamdulillah, like, Allah helped me. I still don't have this solved with my kids. You know what I mean? I'm still not where I want to be with them, and I love them so deeply, but it's just like, you want to, I still don't have that connection that I want to have. And I ask Allah to, facilitate that, you know what I'm saying? And
I'll make it easy for you.
I mean, but alhamdulillah, I got remarried to a wonderful woman. I have 2 new kids, new kids. They don't replace my old kids, but they give me the opportunity to be a father again. Like my oldest is 4, which is how old my oldest was when I was arrested. And in some very strange way, they are like I see my 4 of them rolled up in these 2. You know what I mean? So like I see like Aisha and I see Hassan, and I see Fatima, and I see Hamza, and in them, Allah gave me the opportunity to be a husband and a father again, and it's definitely not easy. I mean, it's really hard. I'm still coping with a lot of PTSD and a lot of effects of prison, and trying to like get back used to normal life. That a lot of times things, pop up in you that you don't even realize that you're still.
Yeah.
Now it's been like what, I mean, 2000. It's 16, 17, 18, 19.
8 years.
That's crazy. Yeah. Wow. That's crazy.
Well, it's the 8th year.
Yeah. That's crazy. Wow. Yeah. So it's been that, it's been a while, but still like there's prison in me. You know what I mean? That may always be there, So anyway.
Allah. So you came out of prison and you started working you were mixing concrete. Yeah. In the beginning, and then from there you kind of, what did you do after that? Because I know now you were a director at a Religious Freedom Institute.
Yeah.
So how did that kind of happen? What kind of brought you back into the whole kind of activism?
Sort of activism. Yeah, it's not exactly activism, but kind of nonprofit world and stuff. Well, that's the only job I ever had apart from the ice cream.
What you knew.
Yeah, apart from the ice cream.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what I knew. It's like, it's my default, And the whole time while I was in prison, I'm like, reading and writing and, doing legal work. And, I was always, because when I was with Kara, I was doing legal stuff. So, it's like I kept my legal chops up, I mean, very, very high level law, that I'm doing, reading history, reading political science, reading philosophy, reading, studying religion. So I actually kind of got to the point of being, very highly, I was already qualified from all my years of working, but I was, I had a lot of qualifications, but I'm, mixing concrete, I mean? I was like, who's going to hire me, And at the time when I got out, it was like, okay, so I had been kind of like considered like an extremist or whatever. And now I'm out of prison. And now I'm like, not an extremist. And I never was an extremist. But there's a marketplace for like the former extremist. You know what I mean? Like, and at that time there was still like the CVE, like countering violent extremism industry was a thing still. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I'm seeing some guys who had been like in prison for like, terrorism related stuff, and they come out and they're doing this and are working with like a university to like counter extremism. And so I was just like, it just seemed like
you didn't want to play into that.
I didn't want to play into that. I know I didn't want to. And what am I gonna like fake it?
Yeah.
That I was, what I mean? Like, I had some dumb ideas. I was unwise, but I wasn't like, what I mean? And I'm like, it just seemed weird. It just seemed like not my, distasteful. So I'm like, I'm not going to do that. You know what I'm saying? And so I just was continuing with the concrete thing. And I wrote an essay, which is still online floating around, called American Muslims and Islam Drift Apart. And I wrote it about how it seemed that, like, again, you got to understand, like in the 90s, like Islam and the Muslims in America were like, it was like a real, it seemed like, look, like one brother put it this way, it seemed like Islam was going to take over. You know what I mean? It seemed like there was just like this dawah. It seemed like so many people were coming into Islam. It just seemed like that it was so dynamic of a, maybe takeover is too strong of a word, but it just seemed like we were, really, really building something, and then with it all gone, and then not only with all that gone because of the 9/11 thing, but also that so many Muslims, like, it was so weird to see like so many people like so distant from I don't know, like having weird ideas of like, being pro like LGBT.
Yeah, just trying to fit in.
And maybe not even trying to fit in. It's just that like young people were kind of, now the older generation, they were trying to fit in. And I remember asking one imam, who I'm not going to name, but who I love very much. I mean, I knew him for decades. I said, what are you doing out here? Like, what are you guys doing? Like, I said, like, I had just gotten out of prison. I'm like, I'm talking to people, and I'm like, I don't even like relate to these young people anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, well, we had to play the game because, and I'm like, yeah, you're playing a game, but they're taking that seriously. You know what I mean? you didn't show any kind of like moral leadership. You didn't like take a stand. You didn't like hold the line while all this, America's morality is like, slipping away.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I wrote an essay about that, and what it was like my experience of like, it's like a time traveler, what I mean? Like imagine going up forward in time and like things are so weird. And so like you write, something about how
That's what it felt like when
that's
you
what
go
it
into
felt like.
prison,
I felt like a time
being
traveler.
disconnected from society.
Exactly. I felt like a time traveler.
Yeah.
It's like time is on pause and now you press play again. You know what I mean? That's what it was for me, So I wrote an essay about that. And so someone saw it, a Catholic lady saw that, and she's like, "Oh, I really like what you wrote." It's like Catholic conservative, you know what I mean? So she's like, "Oh, here's a Muslim voice for like moral values and so on." You know what I mean? Which to me, I was like, I wasn't being any different than I was or any other Muslims that I knew at the time. It's just that I was now like seemed kind of strange because they're Muslims.
Because you stuck by what
what I believed in, and I have to say that like Alhamdulillah, I didn't go through that fitna because I understand why people succumb to that. You know what I mean? Like I really do, especially after like this with this Pulse shooter. The guy went into the gay club and shot up everyone. And it's like you putting Muslims into a position where they feel like it's existential, like they have to do that to survive. You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's not principled, but at the same time, like I can get it, I get it. But I wasn't subjected to all that. So like I came out and I was like, come on, let's tighten up. You know what I mean? Let's be Muslims.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That message was resonating with these Christian conservatives. You know what I mean? Now, you got to understand, before I got locked up, when I was at Mass in 2002, 2003, I was like, pursuing the same agenda. Like I was like, it was a group of us, young people, like around my age, who had been through some years of activism. And we're like, you know what? Let's start making some inroads with Christian conservatives because,
very alike.
we think alike in a lot of ways. You know what I'm saying? And we started doing that. Like we were like, it was like real visionary brothers and stuff. And then I got arrested. You know what I mean? Now, a lot of people don't realize this, that the situation of the Muslims actually got worse. Like the first couple of years after 9/11, it wasn't as bad as it got. And I was kind of like monitoring that because we would get like, Islamic magazines, like, Washington Report on Middle East Affairs and like, which is like, not Islamic, but, it's like, we're kind of monitoring and we're hearing from our families and we're kind of have some, finger on the pulse of what's going on. And we realize that like, man, they're really like going after Muslims really bad. It's like 2007, 2008, 10, 11, 12, we're seeing things actually getting worse than it was in 2002, 2008. Yes, that immediately after they came in and they like deported all the mess, but it's for the ordinary average person, that's getting worse, so like, anyway, man, so I came out and I wasn't really doing, like I said, I wasn't doing anything different. I had been thinking the whole time of, what, we got to start like trying to disarm these Christian conservatives and make them realize that we're not the enemy. You know what I mean? Like whoever's trying to portray us as the enemy is actually trying to like undermine the good that we could do. You know what I mean? And similarities. And so they're trying to divide us. So you don't let people divide us. So I came out and I said, that was kind of the work that I was doing, now the tough thing is, as I mentioned, that I had a separation between me and the Muslim community simply because
you were gone for so long.
I was gone for so long. Like no one knew me. You know what I mean? Like when I got locked up, I was like a known person. People knew who I was. I wasn't like a famous guy because I was still kind of junior. You know what I mean? Like I was only like 20 something, but people knew me. Like I would speak at conferences. I was speaking at Mass's conference. I would speak at Islamic Association for Palestine. I would, I was like writing op-eds in the newspapers. I was Ibrahim Hooper's like second in command. You know what I mean? Like the deputy. When I was at CARE, and then at Mass, I was doing big things. So when I come out, I'm like, no one recite al-Fatiha. You know what I mean? Like, that's So it was ironically, I ended up in a track this Catholic lady rescues me from the mixing concrete thing. You know what I mean? But you also got to understand that like no Muslim organization would have anything to do with me because I just came out of prison with terrorism case. You know what I mean? So-called terror. I didn't really have a terrorism. I was charged with that, but that was dropped. That was, what I mean? But still, like no one really wanted to hire me, and I was like, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them for that. Like I'm trying to figure out like how do I how do I make
Resume
a
life.
yeah resume life, and how do I make a positive impact in the field of like nonprofits while I've got this stigma, you know what I mean? And like, and I don't want to do the I'm the
Mm-hmm.
extreme, a former extreme. I don't want to do that. So alhamdulillah, what happened basically is I just continued working with these Catholics. Actually, they were Catholics, and doing like kind of being like a voice for like at that time my Arabic was really good, so I could do like research in classical Arabic, and would write, and I would just kind of like be a spokesperson or whatever. And then that organization merged into the Religious Freedom Institute because it kind of like had some organizational troubles, and then
Mm-hmm.
so when they merged with Religious Freedom Institute, which was like much more established, and it had been part of Georgetown, and then had just like split off to become its own think tank. I joined that, and I have ever since been trying to rebuild with the community. I had a really hard time rebuilding with the community in Northern Virginia and DC area, simply because like I said, I didn't really know anyone, and also that I had a lot of emotional issues. You know what I mean? I had a lot of emotional issues because I would go to Darul Hijra, and I would remember, like, I'd have flashbacks. I'd remember scenes. I know I've been talking a long time, but I gotta mention this. Just something from
We're all good.
my youth. I this is when I still was living on the dorms at American University. I would come out to Darul Hijra because there was so much activity there. I would take the bus, so I'm the bus down Columbia Pike from the Pentagon, and get off at Leesburg Pike, and then I would, like, in Bailey's Crossroads, and I would walk up Leesburg Pike because I didn't know how to get the bus. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? It's not that long of a walk, so I would walk, and I remember walking, and I saw some cops in front of Darul Hijra. This is Make 93.
Yeah.
There's cops in front of Darul Hijra, like on Leesburg Pike on Route 7 with the lights on and stuff. And I see a body laying in the street, like in Route 7. And I was like, subhanAllah, like, what's going on? But so I go into the masjid, and there's the Bosnian sheikh who had come from Bosnia to raise money for refugees and
Mm-hmm.
so on. And it was, I had missed Isha, but he was doing the lecture after Isha about, and he was doing some fundraising. And he's going on and on about and this is around about the time when I was formulating that intention to go to
Mm-hmm.
Bosnia. So in comes to the masjid a brother, and he says, everybody, he makes an announcement, Ikhwan, brother so-and-so, it turned out to be like a real well-known, like, brother who I didn't know at the time because I was so new to the community, but like a real well-known brother, everyone knew him, had gone home where he lived in the apartments across the street from Darul Hijra, across Route 7, to get money to come back and bring it to the sheikh to donate to Bosnia. But when he was crossing the street to come back with the money in his pocket, he was hit by a car and killed.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah. And the
Allah
whole
yarhamah.
place started weeping. You know what I mean? Number one, at the death of the brother, but the other thing is, like, this is how you die.
Mm-hmm.
You died bringing money to give to orphans. You know what I mean? Like, how many of us die going to something stupid? You know what I mean? Or something waste of time, or
Mm-hmm.
even something haram. But to die in that way, it was like being in the presence of, like, to see that, it was like a sign from Allah. You know what I mean? And I really. So now I'm going back to the masjid when I get out of prison, and this is what the scenes that I'm remembering,
Yeah.
and the feelings that I had, and all the faces of friends and brothers that came and went in all the years, and I got people challenging me to
Mm-hmm.
recite al-Fatiha. You know what I mean? So I had too much emotion for this area that I just could not reconnect, and I moved to Pennsylvania when I got married, because I just felt like I needed to restart. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So alhamdulillah, I'm in Pennsylvania, and it is what it is. But I also did not help myself because I clashed a lot with people, like, online and on the internet, and social media,
Yeah.
about like what I saw as being like their bad moves in like making alliances with, like,
Mm-hmm.
really morally corrupt people. And then these folks, because they had many of these people, first of all, now they had animosity to me because I was criticizing them. I realize now that was a really bad move. I'm like, you don't come out and just start, like,
Yeah.
making enemies. So I really, really feel bad, and I really deeply regret and that move. And then they are seeing me with like, okay, I'm trying to work with conservative Christians to try to build bridges. Like I'm trying to like solve and unwind a lot of the problems that had
Mm-hmm.
come by being a relatable voice to them. You know what I mean? And a lot of those guys were seeing that as suspicious. Like, why are you, those are the ones who have been
You're
causing us
building
all these
bridges with the wrong
problems over these
people.
years. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I have to say that, alhamdulillah, like that has dissipated a lot. You know what I mean?
Alhamdulillah.
Like, it's like, it makes a lot more sense to people what I'm doing and what I'm trying to do. And I also have a lot more empathy for people and see that, their hearts are in the right place. I mean, that's the one thing is like, you got to realize that everyone's trying to do the right thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
no one's out there being like, I'm going to be evil. You know what I
I
mean?
think there are some
There
people
are
like,
some people
yeah.
doing that, but but the thing about it is that these are rare people.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? It's rare when you have an actual like munafiq. You know what I mean? And one interesting aspect of that is because where did like the munafiqeen like get uh, uh, more popular and start showing their faces was in Medina when there were benefits to being Muslim. You know what I mean? But now it's like no one's really benefiting from being a Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like actually hard to be a Muslim. You know what I mean? So the people who are like it's more than likely that when you see someone who is saying, even though we're maybe doing the dumbest things, or you'll see people like attacking like Sheikh, I'm not even going to mention them, our scholars, our imams and things. So, okay, you can look at them, you can say, okay, yeah, you're not, maybe like you could do things better or whatever, you know what I'm saying? But it's like, these are not people with bad intentions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like and I say that even about people who, well, what I think are like doing really actually really damaging stuff to Islam, that we have to avoid. That doesn't mean like that you don't say respectfully disagree or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, but just we have to learn to treat each other with brotherhood and assume the best of people,
Yeah.
of them, especially the Muslims. Anyway,
Definitely. No, mashallah. Well, it was great having you. I think
thank you.
there's a lot that can be learned from this, and I mean, I know I definitely learned a lot from having this conversation, and time flew.
Oh, really?
Mashallah. I honestly don't know how long we've been recording for, but
I don't know either.
alhamdulillah, this was honestly very eye-opening. Thank you for being here. Thank you
Thank
for
you so
sharing your
much for
story.
having me.
Of course,
It's
yeah,
an
no,
honor.
definitely. But
Yeah, thank you for everyone who stuck with this and listened to the end.
alhamdulillah,
Yeah, may Allah give.
it was very worth it. If you're here until now, then I'm sure you learned a lot. But alhamdulillah, again, thank you for being here. I hope that everything kind of works out with your children, with
Thank
your
you.
kids.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Inshallah.
But there's a lot more life to go, although we might die
Allahu
tomorrow.
a'lam,
Yeah, Allahu a'lam, might die tomorrow,
we-
but Allah may give us a lot more, time to live and have, solve old problems and make new problems.
Yeah,
So-
that's very true. Allahumma ameen.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you so much. And with that, make sure that you do subscribe. Check us out on our social medias. If you guys have any recommendations for other guests that you want to see on the podcast, make sure that you email us at social@dcmy.org, or just text us, DM us on Instagram. But again, thank you for being here. We'll see you guys in next week or maybe in a couple weeks. But assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.